have the wonderful Associate Professor Emma Power speaking again on behalf of Madeline Cruice. Thank you.
I'm really sorry I'm not Madeline. Okay, got to get moving. I'd like to just go back and Madeline can't be here. She was intending to present and acknowledge Kate Swan and Carol Smith, who did this research with us. So, criticism of much of the measures used to understand clinicians' practice is that, sorry, I'll go back. Currently, speech pathologists assess quality of life with constructs in people with aphasia, mostly informally, if at all. Often through conversation, and despite indicating that they know it's an important component of their practice. So, however, alone, informal measures might not be adequate for directing client treatment and demonstrating our value through outcomes and providing more standardised care. Utilising more formal or structured approaches to quality of life is important to enhance our quality of care. We know that there are some barriers to doing this, which include knowledge, skills, confidence, the tools, quality of life tools, and time. But as yet, no studies have sought to connect these barriers with theoretically informed implementation strategies, such as the behaviour change wheel, which you've heard about. When we utilise such theory-informed, tailored implementation interventions, these are more likely to be successful because they target the real issues that are occurring. So, what our question really was is, for speech pathologists who received a tailored, brief educational intervention to increase their quality of life practice, what is their perspective on quality of life? It's the use and implementation of quality of life assessment tools we tell them about in the intervention, and any barriers and facilitators in practice. And we specifically were asking about a 6 to 8 week post-intervention trial implementation period. So it wasn't just their hypothetical things, it's go away, do it, and then tell us how it went, okay, which is more unusual in some of the implementation research. So a criticism of the measures used to understand clinicians' practice is that it's atheoretically driven in terms of behaviour change. So our research looked at assessing participants' barriers and facilitators to quality of life practices prior to the intervention, and using the theoretical domains framework, which you've heard about. So it might contain categories such as knowledge, environmental context and resources, and beliefs about capabilities. And then we tailored our one-day educational workshop to those barriers of those participants specifically. And we used the behaviour change wheel to do that. So for knowledge, you might provide information. For environmental context and resources, you might provide the actual quality of life tools in their hands. And for beliefs about capabilities, you might do role plays to increase their belief in their ability to do something. And then we obtain their perceptions immediately after the intervention, which is good to know what they gathered in that one day. But we actually then looked at 6 to 8 weeks after, asking them how they went about that, and that's the focus of our, my presentation today. So we did, our pre-surveys and interviews indicated that clinicians had mostly positive motivation. I'm sure you're all quite keen on the idea, but lacked capability in knowledge and skills, and the opportunity tools. So as a starting point, we created a one-day education workshop that Madeline presented in the UK, and it included quality of life evidence-based practice, challenges that you can come up against, 13 quality of life assessment tools reviewed, and some self-practice and discussion. We had 37 participants and 14 participate in the post-implementation interviews. The mean number of years working is 6, that's lower than my 20-something. And we had people from across the continuum of care, including acute as well. So we're just going to take a walk through the analysis. I'm just going to do something a little bit different. We did sort of a thematic and framework analysis based on the TDF, but today I'm just going to narrate it as if I'm a clinician who was telling you the guts of what we found in the survey and the interviews. So the first thing is, after the workshop, I turned my knowledge into action. So most people actually moved with their interaction by sharing information with others. My colleagues and my managers, as well as the multidisciplinary team. I accessed the resources covered in the workshop from the provided Dropbox, like the social network map or quality of life questions, or I just wrote to the researchers to get the others, like the communication confidence rating scale for aphasia or the QOL. With these resources at hand, I could actually try to use them with my own clients pretty soon after the workshop. The end of the workshop had us develop an action plan to embed these practices into my local processes. For example, I incorporated quality of life into our standardised battery and minimum standards for assessment, or I set up a quality of life working party so a department could move forward on together. And now what I can see is, after doing this, how quality of life fits in with my existing practice. It's not that different. It provides the client's perspective, and these assessments are meaningful and relevant for our clients. I can see that they're useful and lead to positive impacts on my clinical practice in developing rapport, giving context to intervention, providing the patient's perspectives, prongs, directing treatment goals, but also demonstrating the value for what we do by having an outcome measure for it, and giving the client a chance to reflect themselves on what they know about this area. So for example, using the social network map, structured my approach a bit more to explore the engagement of my clients with their current networks. Before, I might have been less comfortable probing this, or the patient was unable to describe their situation, but with a supported tool, I was more able to do that. The information and resources for the workshop, along with a chance to try it for myself, have made me feel more skilled in selecting and using quality of life assessments now with clients. I also feel more confident in tackling quality of life. This extends to using specific assessments and also discussing it confidently with my colleagues. What's helped is I've increased my confidence in my knowledge of the importance of quality of life, the quality of the tools at my disposal, and the evidence surrounding it to do that. However, quality of life implementation occurs in a challenging work context for me and requires negotiation in my role, support, time and effort. In some cases, I've been able to manage the challenges and create some quality of life routes, but for others, I know this has been much harder. So quality of life implementation is hard with caseload pressures and so many clients to see, where there's temporary staff or another workplace restructure. All these things make it harder for my acute colleagues to implement quality of life approaches in their practice there. It's a real challenge for them. And then other colleagues you have to deal with, they have service structures, for example, where there is no multidisciplinary team and they're in private practice and don't have access to other clin psych and other services. Also, to implement quality of life approaches, I need to refine my role a bit alongside clinical psych. Who am I in relation to them? Where's our boundaries? And being a profession where impairment-based therapy and language measures are promoted is often the norm, and so I've got to redefine how I approach how I'm going to do that part of my job. It would be good in the future to get more support for quality of life practice from my manager and multidisciplinary team. That's the area I still need more help. Having my manager drive inclusion approaches from the top would further help me to change my practice in this area. I believe the MDT team may have other priorities for their outcomes and clients rather than quality of life. And it's not as high for them. They may need some education, so there's some broader endorsement of quality of life to take that whole of team approach forward. Once I committed to quality of life approaches, I had to invest time and effort. Before, I wasn't sure I had time to even do quality of life work. Now I have tried to incorporate it. It's more than the time is a different issue. Time is required to buy resources, learn to use assessments, familiarise yourself with them and consider how to implement them in practice. For example, just working out how to complete quality of life assessments within a session and then do all the other assessments and the TOMs, they use the TOMs, takes time in getting used to. Sometimes it's just that my colleagues have very little time with a client to even get to it. Services are time restricted on a macro level and there are too many contacts a day to do quality of life properly. When you're talking more than just impairment, there's more need to take the time to build a trusting relationship with my client and also to get other professionals to the table around it. So time is a real barrier. It means no headspace to consider the new. Okay. And finally, there's competition with existing outcome measures. A lot of their outcome measures are determined by where the patient is in the process and are language focused. It would help also at the next stage to actually know how to incorporate those things into our service. So the intervention, that story that I told you there is the story of most of the participants in going to the intervention. The intervention gives knowledge and resources, essentially providing increased capability and opportunity to the clinicians to change their practice in quality of life. They ran with that. You know, the idea that clinicians don't want to change, you know, wasn't clear here. They actually turned their knowledge and resources into opportunity. Implementation really addresses the motivations. The speech pathologists can see an aligned fit. It fits. They go, this is the kind of thing we do. We're in the right place. And so their social and professional role is strengthened. It yields positive outcomes which fuels belief in consequences. It is important I do quality of life work. And it's positive overall, which fuels emotion, which is in the TDF, which we often negate, but emotion was positive. I feel good about doing this now. And they experience largely success doing it, which then drives their beliefs in their capabilities to keep doing it. And so the TDF helps us to explain that, but still we have opportunity restrictions. The time to implement is hard, and the multidisciplinary team don't seem to want to walk with the participants in the same way they want to go. There is a motivation issue, and that is that I have to actually spend effort on redefining my role, work out where I fit in this team to provide this service amongst the others that are there. And so it requires, these things might require different strategies which we didn't deliver in that intervention. Okay. So suddenly the barriers have now come around again and they're different. We started with the barriers at the beginning, we've addressed some of them, but your only threat to implementation is often doing it. And so what happens is once you start to do it, then new things come up as barriers. And so that's what we have here is in those red boxes. So in the end, there are some limitations. This is a short implementation, it's 1 day. I mean, that's still too long for some of you, isn't it, though? Like really, it's still a day out of work. And there's self-report measures only. The clinical implications are that we should try and make this available to speech pathologists who feel that knowledge and resources are part of their issues for their barriers. And it adds value to people with aphasias service that they receive. We need to do a longer implementation time and follow-up. We did 6 to 8 weeks, but maybe we should do longer. We need new strategies for these new barriers. How are we going to help speech pathologists to influence the multidisciplinary team? What does that require in terms of intervention for behaviour change? And we need to take a team-based intervention. Thank you.
Perhaps there's one question. Down in front of you, Michelle.
Emma, I guess it comes to the clinical implications. Are you planning on sharing that Dropbox?
No. Well, actually, Madeline is looking at that in relation to what she can share and has permission to share. Some of the stuff was given to permission for that particular thing only, but mostly what you can do is write to someone and they'll send something to you if they can, and that's the best way to go, I think. It helps that person know you're interested in that work and you can always get back to them. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Emma.